Plasma bolts slammed into the bulkhead near Joseph's head, splattering molten metal inches from his face. The mercenary grit his teeth. These alien bastards had no idea who they were messing with. Humans didn't go down easy. Joseph crouched behind a scorched metal crate in the cargo hold of an old tac-tac freighter. Acrid ozone stung his nostrils, plasma fire sizzling overhead. He checked his rifle's charge. Half capacity. Damn. 5-1 odds, outnumbered and outgunned. He shook his head, scowling. I told that damned Orion this job stunk. Too good to be true. 3 cycles back, Joseph had been knocking back rot-gut whiskey in some dive bar on a podunk moon. Low on credits. Orion, an old tac-tac contact, sidled up with an offer. Escort some precious ore shipment. No questions. Fat payday. Desperate, Joseph signed on. Then it all went to hell. Tac-tac raiders came in hot, hungry for the score. Orion was ghost, probably ash. Now Joseph was trapped on a ship under siege, fighting for his life, for the cargo. A plasma bolt slammed his crate, sending it tumbling. Joseph hit the deck, exposed. Raiders took aim, human heart jackhammering, mind racing. He had one shot. Joseph palmed a stun grenade off his belt, cooked it, chucked it at the bug-eyed bastards, ducked. The flashbang popped, rattling his bones, blinding white hammer concussion. Ears ringing, Joseph rolled up to a knee, sighting through smoke. Stunned raiders, locked up. His moment. Joseph charged, barking, plasma rifle flaring, caught 2 center mass, fell shrieking, guts steaming out old exoskeletons. The last 3 shook it off, returned fire. Joseph hit the deck, skidded behind a beam. Superheated plasma cooked the steel, singing his face. Sweat poured, pain seared his nerve endings. Blind firing around the beam, Joseph laid down, suppressing fire, forcing them back. No luck. A bolt clipped his rifle. Gun sizzled, sparked, cooked off. Shit! He dropped the dead weight. Drew twin tungsten pistols, popped up, charged in, guns blazing. Slugs punched through alien armor, shattered carapace, sprayed viscous green blood. Silence crashed down like thunder. Joseph stood panting, pistols up, scanning, waiting. Nothing. Slowly he exhaled, let his arms fall. Adrenaline ebbed and pain flared, plasma-seared meat on his thigh. Damn it, Orion, Joseph spat blood on tac-tac corpses. You better be dead already, 'cause I'm going to kill you. But that was a problem for later. He had the cargo, had to reach the drop, get paid. Then he'd deal with Orion, the Terran way. Joseph's legs screamed with each step as he dragged himself to the intercom panel. He slammed the call button, growling, "Orion, what the hell is going on?" Static hissed back. "Orion, answer me, you bug-eyed son of a bitch!" Silence. Joseph pounded his fist against the bulkhead, pain lancing up his arm. Damn it! The ship bucked violently under his feet. Joseph stumbled, slamming into the wall. Alarms wailed, red emergency lights flashing. A robotic female voice blared over the PA. "Warning, hull breach detected. Initiating emergency protocols." Hull breach? What the... Joseph staggered down the corridor, one hand pressed to his bleeding thigh. He reached the control room and palmed the door release. It slid open with a hiss. Empty. No sign of Orion. But a bloody, 3-fingered tac-tac handprint smeared the main console. Joseph's eyes narrowed. "Where are you, you bastard?" His gaze snapped to the viewport. A massive shadow eclipsed the stars. A tac-tac battlecruiser bristling with plasma cannons, all aimed directly at the freighter. Joseph's heart stopped. His mind raced, putting the pieces together. The cargo, the raiders, Orion's disappearance. This was a setup from the start. Orion sold me out. The battlecruiser's comms crackled to life, a harsh electronic buzz translating to Terran Common. "Freighter Nebula's bounty. You are hereby ordered to stand down and prepare to be boarded. Surrender your cargo and crew immediately or be destroyed." Joseph's fists clenched. If he gave up the cargo, he was dead anyway. But one freighter against a battlecruiser? Suicide. The cruiser's plasma cannons would melt the Nebula's bounty into slag in seconds. His eyes darted over the control console, mind racing. Then he saw it. The comms panel. An idea formed, desperate and stupid, his favorite kind. Joseph flipped open the channel, modulating his translator to mimic the chittering clicks of Tak-Tak speech. "This is the captain of the Nebula's bounty," he rasped. "We surrender and request mercy." A barking alien laugh. "Mercy? You must be new to this sector, Captain. Prepare to be boarded. Your cargo and your lives now belong to the Tak-Tak Dominion." The channel went dead. "Yeah, I don't think so," Joseph muttered. His fingers flew over the control panel, sealing blast doors around the cargo hold. A few more commands and the ship's other airlocks opened, venting atmosphere. If these bugs wanted the cargo, they'd have to claw their way through the ship to get it, and he'd be waiting. Joseph checked his pistols. Half charge each, it would have to do. He headed aft towards the airlock where the battle cruiser was already maneuvering to dock. No more running. The freighter shuddered as the cruiser's umbilical tube slammed home, magnetic clamps locking on. Tak-Tak shock troopers stormed aboard, plasma rifles sweeping. Joseph pressed his back to a bulkhead, taking slow breaths, listening to the clatter of alien feet on metal decking, growing closer. Showtime. He swung out, pistols flaring. The nearest trooper's head exploded in a spray of ichor and chitin. 2 more fell, tungsten rounds punching fist-sized holes in their carapaces. Then the Tak-Tak opened up and all hell broke loose. Plasma bolts crackled past him, searing bulkheads, flashing his vision white. Joseph fired until his pistols clicked dry, then charged. He body-slammed the first trooper, bearing it to the deck. Chitinous armor cracked under his weight. He swung his pistol, caving in the Tak-Tak's skull. Plasma scorched his back, burning through his pressure suit. White-hot agony flared up his spine. Joseph roared in pain and rage. He whirled, scooping up a fallen plasma rifle, and unloaded into the shock troopers crowding the umbilical. Tak-Tak fell squealing, oozing fluids, but more surged past their dying comrades, heedless of the carnage. Joseph backpedaled, still firing. A bolt clipped his shoulder, spinning him around. He sprinted for an access corridor, plasma sizzling past his head. Reaching the hatch, he dove through and slapped the control panel. The blast door slammed shut. Joseph lay panting, skin blistered and charred. His suit's biofoam injectors hissed, pumping him full of coagulants and painkillers. The Tak-Tak would cut through that door in minutes. He had to move. Groaning, Joseph pushed himself up on hands and knees and started crawling towards the engineering deck. He had a plan. A way to get the cargo to the drop, get paid, and make these Tak-Tak bastards pay. And God help anyone who got in his way. Joseph staggered into the engineering section, plasma scorched and bleeding but still standing. He grabbed a jagged shard of metal and jammed it into the door controls, fusing them shut. Not much of a barricade against the Tak-Tak troopers right behind him, but it would have to do. He scanned the room and spotted a spindly Tak-Tak cowering behind the reactor control console, long limbs quivering. Joseph leveled his pistol at the alien's bulbous head and snarled, "You've got 5 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't ventilate your skull for leading us into this ambush." The Tak-Tak raised its upper appendages in a gesture of submission, mandibles clicking rapidly in its native tongue. "Please, I am Ziktar, the chief engineer. I knew nothing of this betrayal. I am but a simple technician. I want no part in this conflict." Joseph narrowed his eyes but lowered the pistol fractionally. The bug seemed sincere enough, and he was running out of options. "Fine. Then you're going to help me scuttle this ship." Ziktar's compound eyes widened in shock. Scuttle? But that would destroy the cargoes and us along with it. A grim smirk twisted Joseph's blood-flecked lips. "That's the idea. If we can't have it, nobody can. Now get to work overloading that reactor, or I'll splatter your brains across it." Ziktar hesitated for a moment, then scurried to the console and started manipulating the controls with deft, precise movements of his appendages. Joseph kept his pistol trained on the engineer, watching the door. Suddenly, the barricaded door exploded inward with a deafening boom, sending razor-sharp fragments of metal flying like shrapnel. Joseph threw himself to the deck, feeling the heat of the blast wash over him. Then he was up on one knee, firing into the smoke and flames. Tac-tac shock troopers poured through the breach, heavy armor gleaming in the hellish light. Joseph's tungsten rounds sparked off their carapaces as they returned fire with searing blasts of plasma. Ziktar shrieked in terror and dove for cover behind the console. Outnumbered and outgunned, Joseph fell back behind the massive bulk of the reactor housing. A plasma bolt sizzled past his head, close enough to make his hair smoke. "Ziktar," he roared over the chaos, "is the reactor primed?" A terrified affirmative click came from somewhere behind the console. Joseph gritted his teeth. "Then finish the overload sequence and let's get the hell out of here." He popped up from cover and unleashed a storm of suppressive fire, forcing the troopers to duck behind the smoldering wreckage of the door. Ziktar made a break for it, scuttling for the rear access shaft. Joseph was right behind him, firing blindly over his shoulder as he ran. They piled into the shaft and Joseph hit the emergency lock. The heavy blast door slammed down just as the troopers opened up on full auto. Then he and Ziktar were racing through the maintenance tunnels, warning klaxons blaring in their ears. "Containment failure imminent," a robotic voice intoned. "All personnel evacuate immediately." They reached the escape pod bay, and Joseph practically threw Ziktar into the nearest pod before clambering in himself. Plasma bolts stitched the deck plates as the troopers caught up. Joseph slapped the launch button, and the pod blasted free of the ship. A fraction of a second later, the freighter's reactor went critical. A miniature sun bloomed in the void, consuming the ship in a maelstrom of light and fury. The shockwave slammed into the pod like the fist of an angry god, sending it tumbling end over end. Joseph felt the crash webbing dig into his bruised flesh as he was hurled against the restraints. Ziktar slammed against the bulkhead with a sickening crunch. Then silence. The pod's autocorrect kicked in and the spinning stopped. Joseph shook his head to clear it and peered out the viewport. The freighter was gone, reduced to an expanding cloud of molten debris. And there, looming in the distance like a monstrous crustacean, was the Tac-Tac battle cruiser, heavily damaged by the blast, venting atmosphere from a dozen gaping wounds, but still operational. Joseph felt a chill run down his spine. They weren't out of this yet. The battle cruiser would be coming for them to finish the job, to tie up loose ends. He turned to Ziktar, who was dazedly untangling himself from the crash webbing. "I hope you know how to hotwire this thing's distress beacon to broadcast on Dominion frequencies." He bared his teeth in a predatory grin. "Because we're going to need a ride out of here, and I've got a score to settle with your people." Ziktar's thin, spindly appendages worked feverishly inside the escape pod's control console, cross-wiring and rerouting power to the distress beacon. His compound eyes darted from circuit to circuit, sweat beading on his chitinous brow. Joseph watched tensely out the viewport as the Tac-Tac battlecruiser loomed ever larger, its plasma cannons swiveling to lock onto their tiny pod. He clenched his fists, knuckles white. They had minutes, maybe less, before they were atomized. Come on," Joseph muttered under his breath. Every second felt like an eternity. Suddenly, Ziktar let out a triumphant click, his mandibles quivering with excitement. The distress beacon crackled to life, broadcasting their dire situation on all Dominion frequencies. Almost immediately, a garbled response filtered through the pod's comm system. A deep, flanging voice spoke in the harsh, clicking language of the Tac-Tac. "Escape pod, this is the Dominion frigate Karnak. State your emergency." Ziktar looked to Joseph, seeking permission. The human gave a curt nod, jaw tight. Ziktar clicked into the comm, his voice trembling slightly. "Karnak, this is Chief Engineer Ziktar of the freighter Nebula's Bounty. Our ship has been destroyed by raiders, and we require immediate rescue." A tense pause followed. Joseph's heart pounded in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to grab the controls and fly the pod as far and fast as possible, but there was nowhere to go. Finally, the Karnak responded. "Acknowledged, Nebula's Bounty. Stand by for retrieval." Joseph and Ziktar exchanged a look of pure relief, the tension draining from their battered bodies. They were going to make it. And then all hell broke loose. The battlecruiser opened fire, lancing out with searing beams of plasma. The escape pod shuddered as the first bolts impacted, alarms shrieking to life as the hull integrity plummeted. Ziktar screamed, his voice shrill with terror. "Where's the Karnak? We're going to die." Joseph was hurled against his restraints as another plasma bolt struck home, nearly blacking out from the impact. Warning lights flashed red, filling the pod with a hellish glow. They were coming apart at the seams. And then a miracle. A massive shadow fell across the escape pod as a ship eclipsed the distant sun. The Dominion frigate Karnak, bristling with powerful cannons and gleaming with advanced technology, descended upon the battlecruiser like an avenging angel. The Karnak opened up with all batteries, unleashing a storm of ordnance that lit up the void. The battlecruiser's shields flared, struggling to repel the onslaught, then failed entirely. Explosions rippled across the battlecruiser's hull as the Karnak's relentless barrage found weak point after weak point. Gouts of flame and debris erupted into the vacuum of space as the once mighty warship crumbled under the assault. Joseph watched in awe as the battlecruiser listed, belching atmosphere and bodies. In a matter of moments, the Tak-Tak warship was reduced to a shattered hulk, drifting lifelessly. A tractor beam lanced out from the Karnak, enveloping the battered escape pod and drawing it into the frigate's cavernous landing bay. With a bone-jarring thud, the pod settled onto the deck. Joseph winced as the sudden change in motion aggravated his many wounds. Ziktar sagged in his harness, eyes glazed. The pod's hatch hissed open, and they found themselves staring down the barrels of a dozen plasma rifles. Tak-Tak soldiers in battle armor surrounded the pod, weapons trained on the occupants. A tall, grizzled Tak-Tak officer strode forward, his carapace adorned with the insignia of command. He leveled a plasma pistol at Joseph and clicked an order. The human will surrender his weapons and submit to questioning. Joseph tensed, instinct screaming at him to fight, but he was in no shape for a battle, not now. Slowly, grudgingly, he unholstered his pistols and let them clatter to the deck. The Tak-Tak officer nodded, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. He turned to Ziktar, gesturing with his pistol. "Engineer, you will accompany me to the bridge and explain how your freighter came to be in restricted space." Ziktar bobbed his head obsequiously and scurried after the officer, clearly eager to put as much distance between himself and the human as possible. Rough chitin-covered hands seized Joseph and dragged him out of the pod, disorienting him with their alien strength. He shook his head, trying to clear it as they hauled him towards the brig. "Hey, wait!" he called out to the retreating Tak-Tak officer. "What about my payment for the cargo?" The officer paused, looking back. His mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Oh, you'll get what's coming to you, human. The Dominion always pays its debts." Then Joseph was being dragged away, down dimly lit corridors filled with the clicking and chittering of Tak-Tak voices. The clank of his captor's clawed feet on metal decking filled his ears. A sense of dread settled in his stomach as they threw him roughly into a cell and activated the humming force field. Ziktar's betrayal, the destruction of the freighter, the battle with the raiders, it all swirled in his head like a fever dream. But one thing cut through the haze crystal clear. The Tak-Tak officer's parting words. "The Dominion always pays its debts." Joseph had a sinking feeling that he wasn't going to like how they settled accounts. Joseph slammed against the back wall of his cell as the door slid shut with a hiss, the force field bars crackling to life and casting the small space in an eerie blue glow. He pounded a fist against the unyielding metal, a wordless snarl of rage and frustration tearing from his throat. Hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Joseph paced the confines of his cell like a caged beast, his mind racing. How could he have been so blind? He'd played right into Ziktar's hands, dancing to the tune of that traitorous insect. Without warning, the ship shuddered violently. Joseph stumbled, throwing out a hand to catch himself against the wall. Alarms blared, the harsh sound drilling into his skull. He looked up as the force field flickered once, twice, and died. Heart hammering, Joseph lunged for the door. It slid open at his touch, and he sprinted out into the corridor beyond. Smoke hung thick in the air, stinging his eyes and throat. He coughed, orienting himself. The bridge. He had to get to the bridge, find out what the hell was going on. Joseph raced through the twisting corridors, following the emergency lights. He burst onto the bridge and skidded to a halt, staring in shock at the scene of carnage before him. Consoles sparked and smoked, belching flames. Tac-Tac crew members lay sprawled at their stations, dead or dying, their carapaces cracked and oozing viscous green fluid. And there, at the center of it all, stood Ziktar. The Tac-Tac engineer held a plasma rifle in his trembling appendages, the barrel still smoking. At his feet lay the command officer, sightless compound eyes staring at nothing. Ziktar swiveled to face Joseph, his own eyes glinting with a malicious light that sent a chill down the human spine. Ah, right on time. Joseph gaped at him, struggling to process what he was seeing. Ziktar, what the hell is going on? The Tac-Tac chittered a laugh, a grating sound that set Joseph's teeth on edge. Poor naive human. Did you really think this was just about some cargo? No, this was about you, the famous Joseph Evans, scourge of the Tac-Tac Dominion. Oh yes, I know who you are, and more importantly, I know what you are. A cold knot formed in Joseph's gut. He swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. What are you talking about? Ziktar took a step closer, leveling the plasma rifle at Joseph's heart. You're from Earth, Joseph, the mythical homeworld of humanity, and the Dominion has been searching for Earth for a very, very long time. Joseph's mind reeled. Earth? He'd grown up on a far-flung human colony, never even seen the birthplace of his species. It had been little more than a legend, a half-forgotten dream. But if what Ziktar said was true... The Tac-Tac engineer seemed to read his thoughts, mandibles quivering with glee. When I learned your identity, I knew I had to deliver you to the Dominion. They've been scouring the galaxy for any hint of Earth's location, and a genuine Earth-born human is worth more than 1,000 freighters of ore. I knew you'd survive the ambush, and I knew the Dominion would come for you. And now, here we are. Rage surged through Joseph, hot and blinding. He clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened, fingernails digging bloody crescents into his palms. You set me up. You sacrificed your own crew for what? The promise of a reward? Ziktar gave a negligent shrug, a ripple of chitin. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. The Dominion will usher in a new era of prosperity for the Tac-Tac, and I will be hailed as a hero for bringing them the key to finding Earth. A bitter laugh tore from Joseph's throat. You really think I know how to find Earth? I've never even been there. Irrelevant, Ziktar chittered dismissively. Your genetic material is all the Dominion needs. With it, they can trace the human diaspora back to its source. Earth will be found, and the Tac-Tac will claim their rightful place as the rulers of the galaxy. The fight drained out of Joseph in a rush, leaving him hollow. His shoulders slumped in defeat as the terrible realization crashed over him. He'd failed. Failed himself. Failed his crew. Failed his entire species. Earth, the birthplace of humanity, would fall to the Dominion. And it was all his fault. Ziktar gestured to the viewport with his rifle. Beyond the plasteel, a massive Dominion warship loomed, dwarfing the frigate. Your ride is here, Joseph. Don't worry. I'm sure the Dominion scientist will take excellent care of you. After all, you're a hero of the Tac-Tac people now. You just don't know it yet. As Dominion soldiers marched onto the bridge and seized Joseph's arms, he looked back at the shattered remnants of the Karnak, at the bodies of the Tac-Tac crew who had died never knowing they were just pawns in a much larger game. How many more would die, he wondered bleakly, when the Dominion reached Earth and began their conquest? In the end, he realized it didn't matter. He'd lost, humanity had lost, and the galaxy would never be the same. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.